Hello. Hi, everyone. So I want to really thank Yahoo for this opportunity. I've actually never been inside of. Can you hear me better? I've never been inside of Yahoo, so I dig the purple theme. I also want to thank Crystal and all of the volunteers for the UX Meetup. It's a really wonderful group. And I have to say that, you know, in interaction design, I find this graduate school Twitter feed than anything else. So I highly recommend that you follow Crystal. Alrighty, let's get started. Okay, so you know, the first thing I should say is that this is not a workshop. It's not intended in any way to be instruction. You know, so in other words, don't try this at home. You know, listen, I'm here to contribute to the UX community in Los Angeles. I think it's a really vital community. It's something I believe in, and I think community is really essential to what we do. I also want to push our profession forward as much as possible and challenge us, and I think that that's something that we have to do together. So tonight, I think that look at it as a dialogue and an investigation that we will conduct together. That said, you know, when Crystal first approached me about this, she mentioned something about a UX breakfast club. You know, so you know, I was kind of expecting something like this. You know, maybe you know, sort of Dungeons and Dragons meets AA. We get together at IHOP. You know, sit at a couple booths, trade war stories. You know, then I saw this email going out at Yahoo, and you know, first day of what 162 people that replied, and you know, I had in Yiddish we called it shpilkis for several weeks, and in Italian you call it agita. I was not expecting essentially what this is, which is to me Tahrir Square in Egypt. So this is how you look to me tonight. So, naturally, I weighed the options. I thought about just leaving town. You know, preferably Mars would be a good place right now. They seem to be able to get there. I thought of changing my identity altogether. Maybe move to the bayou, become an alligator wrestler, something of that ilk. As time progressed, you know, the anxiety spiked even more, and then it just started getting plain weird. It just got weird. So, you know, my wife told me, you know, to get nervous, just imagine everybody is naked. And so I just want to tell you all that you look great. Okay. So, no, I'm very, very happy to be here, and really appreciate the turnout. You know, off the bat, I think, you know, if you're expecting a really tactical discussion on responsive design, that's not the direction I'm going to go in. However, it's something, of course, I'll touch upon. For me, you know, what motivates me and the impetus for me to work in this field is more aspirational. I would sort of call myself a futurist in the sense that when I was telling, I think it was TechZulu, you know, that I'm, you know, I'm naturally inclined to pessimism. So I work in this field so I'm forced to be an optimist. I have to believe that technology is going to make our lives better and really unleash all of our potential. So tonight we're going to talk a lot. We're going to talk about meaning. We're going to talk about customer journey work. We're going to talk about this little debate of content versus tasks. And really, where we want to go is beyond the screen. So beyond the device can mean many things, as you can see. So like I said, I'm going to talk a lot about meaning tonight, but not as an expert, really as someone who's beginning to think about it. Because after consuming reams of research on device fragmentation, this futility of marketing as we know it, I just started to gravitate towards meaning. And not in the sense of formal semiotics, anything like that. For me, meaning in terms of interaction design is about resonance. And meaning should serve as a beacon for interaction designers to push us into new interaction paradigms. I know that sounds fancy, but for me that's really what it means. So, but I want to begin tonight as a discussion. I feel like, I'm just scratching the surface, really, with contemplating what meaning is and how it relates to design. So meaning-oriented design, not trying to be fancy here. I'm not trying to, get page views on a blog or anything. But there is an organization in the UK, I believe it's called Precipice, and they coined the term meaning-centered design. So, I want to avoid any litigation or anything. But for me, meaning-oriented design, it actually means something real to me. It's not something that should necessarily replace user-centered design, of course, but it's a more accurate reflection of what we do. Yes, yeah, we put the user first, of course, but we're really more, if you think about this job, you think about what we do, we're really more like synthesis. We have to create meaning, of course, for users, but we also have to create meaning for our business stakeholders that are funding the project, and all within constraints of budget, time, technology. So tonight, this 1, 2, 3 process is not radical in any way. It's really looking at the design process through the lens of meaning, the state of the world, what it could be, and what it should be. But if there's one point that I want to make, really what this exploration is about is thinking of the device last. Basically, as I started to think through this, I realized the device should not prescribe what the experience should be. So that's what we're going to talk about. Now, thinking about device, I was like, well, what is a device after all, right? Well, when you're in doubt, turn to etymology. And, so it's a thing made for a particular purpose. It's also made to arouse a desired reaction. Now, what's a purpose? Well, do you ever do that when you read the dictionary? You're like, it gives you a simple word, and you're like, well, what does that mean, really? I never really thought about what a purpose is. So that's why this is there. It's a reason for which something exists, okay? So therefore, everything is a device, right? A rock is a device. Your body is a device. There is nothing that we engage with in this world that is not a device, even ourselves. So I want to get in front of that there's nothing beyond the device. It's the thinking. It's the universe that happens before we get to the device. So a device exists to serve a need, right? In this case, anyone who's been familiar with Cooper design, they talk about needs being stable, right? So in 2012, you have a need to get somewhere fast, right? And you take a plane. Needs don't really change. Our expectations do. Now, when you're dealing doing with Google Images, you work within your constraints there. I think probably what sparked this image was Congressman Aiken comment that there's legitimate, that our expectations have changed. But the point is, our expectations do change. So we've heard of mental models before. If you haven't, a mental model is the thought process in your head of how something might work. Is one definition. But for me, even a simpler one is an expectation of how something works to serve a particular need. So, everyone from Indy Young to Susan Weinchuck has talked about mental models. But for me, expectation is something you have based on previous experience to serve a need. Our conceptual model, right, is the interface itself in front of users. Part of our job is to align that conceptual model with the user's mental model, right? But expectation is the key word. If you have an expectation for something, you probably have a mental model. So the thing is, we're not always conscious of our needs. Sometimes they're buried, and so stated needs depend on the user to know what they need, right? We need to dig deeper, and we need to dig into their context so we can flesh out unstated and unconscious needs. So, I'm not trying to pit what we're calling meaning-oriented design against traditional UCD. We're lucky to be able to do user research when we can, especially if anyone here works in an agency knows you have to fight to get user research. Is a very difficult thing to sell to clients. Sure, Angel. A lot of times we're designed for that. But what if we focused on meaning and we penetrated beyond what they think they need? So an example might be Instagram, right? We probably had a conscious need to share our photos on mobile, right? But did we have a conscious need to share, to be aesthetic with our photos? Were we even aware that that's something that we needed, that we wanted? When you share something, that you can share something beautiful without being an artist. So someone at Instagram went beyond the obvious. They dug into what our full capacity could be, and fleshed that out and made a really unique product. So we need to be able to distinguish between these two things, and that's difficult, and I probably won't be able to explain exactly how to do that tonight. Ultimately, my point is about focusing on needs, threading them through meaning, and creating culture with that. This is the spectrum. It's about creating culture. Okay, let's just look quickly. I know Apple's such a cliche at this point, but it's working quick. As far as so I'm concerned, in terms of being ambitious, portable with our music, that's obvious. Certainly, there were MP3 players. There was the Walkman before that. But someone thought about, we also kind of have a need to carry all our music with us, and our entire music collection. If you ask people, they don't know that they need that. They don't expect it, right? So the thing is, Apple came along, dug into a deeper need that we weren't aware of, and they created a conceptual model that was really intuitive. This simple circle, right? If you're creating a conceptual model, you have to create a really easy leap for people to make, because they have no expectation of how to work that. There's no mental model that exists of how to work an iPod at the time. So we took it, we adapted it, and then this became the cultural icon that it was. And believe me, Apple didn't set out to create a nice product to just create revenue. They wanted to create a cultural impact. So if we persistently focus on how this could be meaningful to someone at every stage of the design process, we can overcome the boundaries of device and platform fragmentation. That's kind of, the author's message in some ways tonight. The other thing is, let's create cultural patterns, not screens. Why am I yammering on about making culture? I want to read you a quote. The best ideas in this new world still have one thing in common, however. They are discussed, talked about, shared. It's infinitely more exciting to think about being the creators of cultural patterns than it is to be a company trying to find a new way to sell soap in 30 seconds. That's a creative director from Gray in London, Mills and Leonard. So let's aim for culture. Okay, so how do we begin to start to do this? There's a lot of literature out about customer journey mapping and customer journeys. So let's dig into why this is a good place to start. The first thing we need to recognize is that marketing is dead. Now, this is an actual headline from the Harvard Business Review. People are basically, look, the other thing I gotta say is people publish things to get a reaction. When I used to be an editor myself, we like to push those levers. It's a little hyperbolic, let's say, but there's truth in it. People get informed from word of mouth and customer reviews and so on. And it is the Harvard Business Review. So let's look at the old way. We started with awareness. We started broad, and we started to work our way down. It was a very linear, very polite process. The important thing here is that the loyalty loop, which is not necessarily illustrated here, was pretty one-dimensional. My mom, after Toyota, even with the brakes thing, she said, well, I'm going to buy another Toyota. I was like, really? And there's a lot of choices out there. No, I'm just going to do it. So, she's now, in the periphery of that type of thinking. But that used to be the mainstream, right? So let's quickly look at the new way. So we're not really, according to some legitimate research, we're not really influenced by advertising as we used to be. We're influenced by word of mouth, unconscious sensing, life triggers. We simply have so much more data to process now. There's so much more information. So whereas in the old way we went from broad to narrow, we actually start narrow. My mom says, well, you should check out a Honda. And I go online, it's like, oh, but there's a Kia now. And so we actually go from narrow to broad. We go into our active evaluation, and then we go, this is an excruciating process where you suddenly, with incredible velocity, you're going very broad, and then suddenly trying to narrow it down intensely and into purchase. The most important point I want to make here is this active loyalty loop is in the minority. So it used to be that simple. My mom bought a Toyota, she'll buy another one. But this has now moved over this way. I purchase it, and I'm more likely to go into passive loyalty. I may get a Toyota. It seemed to work the first time, but now there's all this new technology coming out so fast. More people are telling me, different people in my life are telling me that I should consider this brand. So it's a much more challenging cycle that we're dealing with. And we need water. Awesome. Wait, I'm not. It's a much more challenging cycle, and the key thing is loyalty is not what we knew. So as interaction designers and UX people, part of our job is is to think about how to create more active loyalty, or any loyalty. So how do we do that? Well, we have to serve people more meaningfully. We have to go further. Let's go. I think that was planned, actually. Okay. So this is a really, really simple customer journey map. Raise your hand if you've seen a customer journey map before. Okay, good. You know, they're really wonderful tools. You know, they can be really robust or they can be really simple. Basically, they help us analyze the entire spectrum of a customer's engagement with a brand or service, and they help surface the weakest moments, right? And the strongest moments too, but more importantly, the weakest moments. And more importantly, the non-digital weakest moments. And that's kind of what frustrates me is, you know, it's like, oh, well, our website sucks, so you guys work on that. Whoa, wait a second. We are user experience professionals. We are about protecting that experience. And I don't care if it's analog or digital, and maybe there's a way to digitize that analog weak touchpoint using our expertise. So that's an opportunity. You know, a good example for me is you know, Amazon. So Amazon competing with brick and mortar. Brick and mortar has the advantage. These inference filters, not necessarily linearly. Maybe depending on the need, it could have a weighted balance to it. And then it's going through these filters, and it's impacted by our existing values and beliefs and memory, and it comes out as meaning. So it's pretty. We could talk about making meaning, but it's pretty difficult, right, to come up with an idea and a design solution that moves through all these things. So rather than getting, you know, too academic about all this, but classification, the need comes in. Well, what is it? I need to understand what it is, the context, where is it? If someone's pointing a knife at me in a dark alley, that's a context, right? Okay, that's probably bad. If my wife is handing me a butter knife in the kitchen, okay, it's probably not bad, although she probably wants me to do work. Interest, what's it got to do with me? Relevance. Expectation, a really big one. We have a couple of filters based on the future. Is it dangerous to me? Do I expect it? Not expect it. If I don't expect it, will it be a surprise or will it be a disappointment? Evaluation, I think this one's really interesting. Is it ethical? Is this something I should do? Is it right for me? And this one I really find interesting. Should I repeat this? Is it something that is reliable? So the filters all draw from our deeper systems, including needs, goals, values, beliefs, and mental models. There are degrees within each filter. For example, the evaluation filter draws heavily on our values. The point here is to think about your design solution and how it would travel through all these filters. You know, advertisers have been doing this for a long time. They appeal to our aspiration, they appeal to our fears, our insecurities, right? And that's how they make meaning. But the one filter that advertising is really struggling with is this one, trust, right? So that's, I mean, again, I'm saying, like, tonight I'm still, like, scratching the surface. That's something I'd love to just dive into. That one filter is so fascinating. So, we need an intermission. Is everyone okay? This is, I don't see anyone doing this, so I'm assuming we can go on. Okay, good. We're making progress. All right, so we've talked a little bit about the customer journey. Now we can geek out on structured content and task analysis and exploring meaning. Now these things here are just a couple examples of activities we can do, content modeling and stories. But in this stage, we're really exploring what could this thing be, right? And this is where, I mean, those of you that were expecting a really robust discussion on responsive design tonight, which always comes up with device fragmentation. We'll touch on it a little bit, but I don't want to retread ground that you guys can get anywhere. You know, I'm trying to get us to think in different ways, but I do think there's a really interesting debate happening in the community about content first, tasks first. You know, so how do you best handle the challenge of platform fragmentation? And to me, you know, to me, this is really kind of like saying, great taste, less filling. I hope that there are people that know that commercial. I'm going to feel really old. So look, there's obviously a lot of value in content, thinking content first, thinking tasks first. It's a little cutesy though. And look, there are people that make, you know, I am not a professional circuit speaker. There are people that like to go around, be polemical, you know, get page views to their blog, or if you're at .NET and publish, you know, controversial things. Everyone's kind of vying for your attention. Doesn't mean they're disingenuous. I just think you read some of these things and there's a lot of absolute thinking. You know, this reminds me, like, we were talking to a colleague of mine. He's like, one of the hardest things about UX design is we breathe in gray. We live in shades of gray. We see nuance everywhere, right? We have to, because our world is so complex. But when we're client-facing, when we're in the world, we have to spit out black and white. So it's a challenge. How do we translate, you know, that world that's up here with integrity? You know, but when it comes to writing and publishing, people just like to, you know, put a stake in the ground. So what started this debate? Some of you might be familiar with Jake Nielsen. You know, not too long ago, he said this really inflammatory statement. Desktop computers and mobile devices are so different. The only way to offer a great user experience is to create two separate designs. Oh my God. So this really started a whole firestorm. What do you mean two separate designs? Well, if it's true, then we really, really are screwed. Not only are there different solutions, there's different devices, there's different platforms. We'll be here all day, right? So let's get into this debate a little bit. And I think, like I said, I think both sides have some value in what they're saying. Hyperbole aside, Stephen Hay saying, you know, there is no mobile web. We should be platform agnostic for content and platform aware for user experience. I like what Karen McGrain says, you know, the future of adaptive content is having a clean basic structure to work with, a well-structured, flexible, reusable set of content that can be published in many places, which is a great point. This one, there's a general agreement that people on the go are not to be trifled with. So, you know, I'm shopping for my car. I'm a mobile guy. I'm always on the go because I've got a mobile phone.
Yeah, people on the go are not trifled.
You know, there's this idea that we've got to get them content as quickly as possible. But the corollary does not hold true. Why do we think that the desktop user is more willing to put up with having unnecessary crap thrown at them, which I love. And you go to your desktop and there's that blinking ad that's like, make money at home, you know, folding, making envelopes or whatever that is. But Christian Lustig wrote in .NET another valid point. There's a case to be made for content not to simply shift or hide, but to change altogether, or to change based on different contexts. I won't read it all, but I believe there is a case to be made that top tasks are different when the user's circumstances. The circumstances in question aren't the type of device the user has, but his location, his situation, his need for certain information. I feel like they're kind of both right, you know, and why are they arguing, you know? Of course, let's go on, but let's say, you know, let's start with a real traditional sort of task first approach. You know, Indy Young, if anyone's familiar with Indy Young's work, she wrote a book on mental models. It's a great method for aligning content with tasks. You know, so this is from a presentation of hers. So first she lays out the task. Now, of course, she's doing user research to identify these tasks. I know you can't read any of this, but these are tasks up here, and she's identified these are different stages, you know, similar to our customer journey map. And then, you know, after she has all the tasks, she says, you know, existing site content audit. So you look at, okay, yeah, we have content for this task. We're good. We're good. We don't need to do it. That's just it. The speed at which we have to design the heavy obstacle of it all. We need to breathe for a second. Wait a second. Just because we've got a proposal template that will serve this need, is that the best solution? Wait a second. What's the most meaningful thing that we could serve, even if we have the content available? So this is getting at the principle, the rigor, and the philosophy that we have to have and fight for every step of the way. Right. Okay, so now this is more of a content-first approach. I'm not a technical architect, but I found this article fascinating. It's written, I don't even remember the poor guy's name, but he basically runs the backend for NPR. And so the basic principle here is to have content producers and ingestion scripts funnel content into a single system, a series of closely tied systems. So what this does is it lets content creators create the most meaningful content, what they're good at. Essentially, what they're doing is they produce, at NPR, they produce the content, they store it with the markup, and then they strip it out so that if they need to present it in a place that doesn't require it, it can go there, and then they reassemble it depending on the presentation layer that's required. So let's say you go from HTML to HTML5. It makes it easy for them to update those standards because they can separate the markup at a really, as content is coming in. Now, those of you that have a technical architecture background probably explain that better than me. The most important thing is CODE stands for create once, publish everywhere. So this is a really powerful concept, I think. And it supports sort of what Karen McGrain is saying, that content has to have this integrity. We can't customize everything as we're conceiving of content. We need to create one reusable structure. Now, I really see within our profession, everything's wireframes. You got a wireframe for that? How about an entity diagram? Want one of those? I can do one of those. So you know, an entity diagram. I mean, another word for this also is just a content model, right? So what NPR has done, they've analyzed their content, and they found, right, there are different ways of structuring it up there. There are different resources, right, assets that need to plug into it. But this is at the anatomical, not anatomical, atomical level. This is the thing that is the most important, the most meaningful, the most portable structure that can go across different devices. So they've done that. And another great point is that we talk about, let's design the CMS. Really, what a lot of us are working with are web publishing systems, not CMS. CMSs need to plug into different services. It's not things like, way back in the day, like Interworld or something like that. These closed systems. So really, there's a lot of enterprise and entrepreneurial thinking that can go into the creation of CMS, but primarily to support the integrity of meaningful content. So to put this kind of drama to rest, really, I think our point of view here is that content first versus task first is kind of silly. It really is a question of emphasis. Well, if I have an experience that is really kind of more like a passive engagement, consuming content longer periods of time in which I'm not, engaging inputs and menus and whatnot. Well, obviously, I should think about content first, right? But not at the expense of thinking about tasks, of course. It's not an either or. Why is the world so black and white? And in the inverse, if you're creating an application in which people are trying to accomplish things, yeah, you might want to start with tasks first. And it's not to say that the content won't be important either. Context as well being really critical with tasks as well. So that's kind of to close the loop a little bit on that debate. But again, my underlying desire is to keep us ambitious. And these are both, good best practices, good tactical approaches to dealing with device fragmentation. But they're not going to disrupt interaction paradigms. So we've talked a little bit about the inference filters in order to create meaning. Another model, this is from Jesse James Garrett, are the 4 types of engagement, which I think are really interesting. And as we're creating, again, these are all references that I think we should refer to as we're creating our design solutions. Now we're mapping. Now we all know that interaction design I should really be calling it user experience, has all these subset disciplines within it. I don't know how we do our job. I mean, you could do your job just knowing this, right? So let's talk about what each of these things are. So we have cognition, which is really using the mind, processing, in an experience. Perception, sight, sound, and touch. We have action, engagement of the body. So those are things like the we, really utilizing that. Just clicking a mouse, maybe using indirect manipulation. And then we have, what did I miss? Action, cognition, and emotion. So I think emotion is kind of an interesting engagement principle. It's a little harder to pin down. It could be the culmination of your experience, things in which these 3 things are all engaged. It could be something that you engage on its own as well. But really the principle here is, as we look to create meaning, we can really try to engage all of these these 4 types of engagement. And it's not right for every solution, but I'm just trying to get us out of the industry, out of being lazy. Let's create an app. client comes to you and says, I need an app. Really? Why? Why do you need an app? Oh, we need an app. Well, there are 500, 600,000 apps. Maybe you should do a multi-site. You can get it on any device. Oh, we need an app. So, I told you there's a pessimist inside. Sometimes he comes out. Okay. Okay, so we talked a little bit about structured content, tasks, and let's talk about going beyond the screen. Look, I hate the screen. I'm just going to go out and say it. I spend too much time on my iPhone. I don't want one device that does everything for me. Why does one device, look, first it was like a cute little Swiss Army knife. Don't get me wrong. You can do all these things with it. It's cool. Now, like, my whole life goes through it. I want to throw it in a river. It's a good thing I got Apple Care Plus. So I want my interactions with the world around me to be adaptive, to be smarter. I want to minimize my inputs. I'm spending too much time. Does anyone know that Microsoft commercial when Windows Mobile came out? I thought it was clever in that it touched on a sort of cultural dilemma of, look, maybe even I've been guilty of this. The guy at the John, peeing in the urinal while he's looking at his phone. The woman taking her clothes off while the guy's looking at his phone. We have to fight for our humanity here. Has anyone seen Wall-E? That's real. This is a real danger. Okay, so I understand with this diagram, not all interaction designers work in marketing. But I think this illustrates a common problem, especially at agencies. We get, the product is created, it gets thrown over the wall from product to marketing. And then they say, hey, you guys, can you build a website for us? Or, can you tell the story of the product? And that's cool, that has to happen, right? But we could do so much more for you. We really could. And I don't want to see interaction design get landlocked into designing screens. I want us to protect the experience, and that means going beyond screens. So while you see this trend with customer experience executives now being hired, meaning that really businesses are starting to get. I defined that problem earlier. There's no loyalty anymore. We need to go extra hard on customer experience. Why would they hire a customer experience officer for that? So they realize that's our opportunity. As UX people, that means businesses get it. It's still too early, though. It's a little early, and it's really kind of clumsy right now because there's still a lot of cultural infighting. Are they hiring them because it's the right thing to do and that it's being written about in Forbes, or are they really intend to make people's lives better with your brand and your service? So while we need a seat at the table at the strategic level, we also need a seat at the table at the product design level. We can create really cool integrated experiences that are minimally invasive and just wonderful. If you could bring us in a little bit earlier. An example, I'll have some examples to follow that, even on a sort of down-to-earth sort of way. You see in gaming right now, a lot of at Blitz we worked on a site called Saints Row. And the client came to us and said, we've got this idea to do like game-to-web features, with things that are integrated into the game and the website. Something like where you can download a character that other people create in the game, because they realize that they have to move in that direction to be competitive. And so that's definitely a industry vertical where I see this integration happening. But where I'd really like to see it happen is more on the industrial design, the consumer electronics, and just everyday objects. We have, quickly, I'm just going to go through this. We have this, what's wrong with this picture? Okay, so Microsoft put out this video on the productivity of the future. I think it came out last year. And it had touch screens everywhere. There's a touch screen. I'm like, bathroom mirror. Oh, how nice. There's a touch screen. A little folding electronic paper. There's a touch screen, everywhere I look. I was kind of like, yeah, okay. It's kind of like when you see those futuristic car drawings from the 50s, and they just look really weird. And so Brett Victor is an engineer at Apple, and I thought he had a really eloquent response to this. He calls the technology of touchscreens pictures under glass. They sacrifice all the tactile richness of working with our hands. It's an interaction design. This is great. Pictures under glass is an interaction paradigm of permanent numbness. It's a Novocaine drip to the wrists. It denies our hands what they do best. So, this is my plea: be inspired by the untapped potential of human capabilities. Don't just extrapolate yesterday's technology and then cram people into it. And I thought that's really quite beautiful. I mean, that's a really eloquent way of doing it. So, this is tonight's battle cry. I won't make us all do a battle cry gesture. Oops. Okay, that's awkward. Try this again. Battle cry. Okay. Like I said, I'd like to see us disperse interactions across everyday objects that we use in elegant, minimal ways, rather than cram everything into an iPhone. This is an idea that I thought was really wonderful. I think I've got to get the guy's name. But in an article I read in Contagious, where they were just thinking about how you could affect luxury objects in the future. Even now, I mean, you could do so all this is a diamond ring, and what if this diamond ring just sparkled more brightly on your anniversary? And so you could remember your anniversary. I mean, yeah, sure. Someone could say, well, I need an anniversary reminder app. We could build that for you, if that's what you want. But are you willing to take a chance? Can we get closer to you at the product design level? Would you be open to that? So this is where I'd like to see us move our profession. Nike Fuel Band. Another great example is a product that's live right now. Daniel has a Nike Fuel Band. So it's not something he's touching every 5 minutes, right? It's something that you have access to. It's connected. It has meaningful data that you can get to when you need to do it. But you don't have this compulsion, like you do with other things. But we won't talk about it. Now this is an ambient umbrella. There's a company called Ambient Technologies that does some really cool products. Now, I have to say, when I showed this presentation to my wife last night, it was a real buzzkill because I got to this slide. She said, "That is the stupidest thing I've ever seen." So, I'm not going to tell you who you should vote for, but anyway, the cool thing here is you have this product's like 4 years old, but the cool thing about it is it has this little glow at the bottom that glows, that senses condensation in the air and glows when it's about to rain, right? You know, imagine keeping it by the front of your door, and maybe, like me, I never look outside, or even check. I don't even check my iPhone for the weather. I don't want to look at it again. This actually is an elegant and useful implementation of what we're talking about. Nest, an obvious choice. The beautiful thing about Nest, minimal feedback. Oh, the leaf just tells me that I'm saving energy. I only have to engage it in moments where I really need to. It learns from me. It's beautiful. But the times when I am engaging with it are so pleasurable, right? I could buy a regular thermometer. Is that what it is? Yeah, thermometer. Thank you. I didn't sleep much. I could buy a regular one, and I'll buy it as long as it works. I'm good. I'll never. I'll only update it if I need to. It's not something I want to think about, right? But because the engagements between the user and this device are so delightful, when Nest 2.0 comes out, I'm going to update it, right? Because the way I would update from a MacBook Pro to a MacBook Air. So that's, you don't have to create this kind of mesmerizing, hypnotic touchscreen to get people to be loyal to you. That's the point of this. And so with that, I said, let's do this. This is just the beginning of pushing ourselves to go beyond the screen. We think about what people really need, and to push ourselves to dig deeper, dig into those latent, unspoken, unarticulated needs, and be enterprising about it. And that's it. And we have Maniac.
John, thank you so much for that. That was really great. And yeah, one more time. Thanks. That's awesome. Would you like to take a few questions? Okay. So if you have any questions, please raise your hand. And our partner in crime, Charlie, will come around and help you with the microphone. So just raise your hand.
Hi, John. Thank you. My name is Monique, and I have a question. So, when you're working on a project and you don't have access to a lot of like first-hand user research, how do you, as a team, determine need?
Well, it's tough. Meeting has several. Meeting has several inputs. One of them is talking directly to people, which is the method I prefer. So I used to be kind of lazy about that, but now I really believe in it. So to answer your question, there's no support for it internally. I want to talk to someone on the 3rd Street Promenade as they're coming out of the Apple Store. I don't care if it's for 5 minutes. I don't care if I talk to one person. I need to get out of my own bias somehow. When you rely on yourself, there's a whole track of design work called genius design, right, where you don't do any user research up front. There's something to be said for that. We, as designers, have experience. We have principles that we've learned, and it's something that's absolutely valid and should not necessarily replace user research, but it's something we can certainly rely on for judgment. So I think it's about synthesizing, and I think it's about going guerrilla style as much as you can.
But sometimes that's scary. Like there's been times I've gone yeah, not in trouble, totally. But so I guess what I'm saying is, yeah, I guess there's no, it's like apologize after, in the sense that sometimes maybe take that feedback and just funnel it into your design as opposed to saying, hey, look what I just got, because it goes with the 3rd Street Promenade or whatever.
Yeah, I think that's an excellent point. I think you use your judgment. You know, is this client progressive enough, interested enough, they care enough to know that you've mapped this to a real human being? If not, I'd still do it, just for your own edification and your own principles, integrity. So I think that's a judgment you make, kind of feeling out the client. Sometimes it's a chance I would take, though, because if you can get them to appreciate that, you can get them to, you can end some really stupid arguments, you know?
Great, what's your name? Okay, I have been thinking for a little while about something that I thought you might have some thoughts on for me to talk about, alternative input devices for users, like getting away from everything being on the screen and into like encoder wheels or faders or physical, something that's different than the mouse and scroller wheel that we're used to, and whether you kind of see that as a future, kind of integrating into part of making design with tactile.
Mm-hmm. Tell me a little more about fader wheels and
well, like an encoder, something that you can spin, something that's a base device, so that you're more things to do with your fingers and your hands, things that you're moving up and down, just sort of alternative types of getting input from users.
Yeah, I think that's a great thing to explore. I mean, it really depends on the design solution or the problem you're trying to tackle. I wouldn't approach an alternative input for the sake of it if it really elevates the experience, of course. I mean, my personal feeling is I would like to remove inputs as much as possible. Of course, as you know, there's a new watch on Kickstarter, I think, called the Martian watch, that is only activated through voice. So unlike the Pebble watch, which is basically a second screen using e-ink technology, which is cool, but it's still a screen I've got to look at. And, on the Martian watch, I can say, call Lily, and I can actually talk to her through the watch. I can do all the things I can do with Siri without having to take it out of my. So I think there's a lot of interesting inputs using voice, and these other alternate inputs are definitely worth exploring. The only thing I would say is that with alternate inputs that require manipulation, we then have to provide training to help develop a mental model for that new input, right? Because if there's, like I said earlier, if there's no expectation for how that works, you got to show me how. It's like the first iPad, right? People, we needed, you open those apps and you get those little translucent screen with the white lettering. It's like over here we needed that a lot because it was a new platform. Anyone else?
Excuse me.
It's like a song over there.
Just sort of respond to what you just said. I mean, isn't it our job to create something that doesn't need instruction? The idea is that no matter what we're going to create or how the user's supposed to use it, they're supposed to, yes, be innovative and yes, think outside the box, but also to stay somehow or push those norms so that people can accept and use technology. In fact, I see a lot of that with mobile applications where we're setting in instructions, and it so reminds me of like 1995 when we set up videos and instructions on how to use the web. And I'm wondering that as we continued on, we started to think, okay, we need to create something that people can use without that. And I think that's something we should always focus on.
Yeah, I think it's a great thing to aspire to. It's definitely something we should try for. I think it's just hard to achieve. I mean, even the iPod, right, had a simple thumb wheel. If you gave that to your mother, she would be like, how the hell do I use this? Right? I mean, this is so simple. So, yes, I believe in that in principle. I think it'll be difficult, and maybe we will be able to achieve that as as people become more accustomed, across different demographics and psychographics to interaction models, that training them will become less of a burden. But generally speaking, I would like to see our systems take on the onus of the interaction more than the user. And there's still, it's all relative, of course, but there's still too much that it's asking of me to do. And but I think it's a really valuable point.
Hi, my name is Tatiana, and I don't have a direct question. I just really want to give some feedback in regards to somebody who is not a UX designer, and I'm not in this field. I'm actually here to explore if I want to go into this field. And what really attracted me is, especially what you said tonight, and also the research I have done, is moving towards a more meaningful way of designing, and what it is that we can do. And I love what you said about bringing value. You know, perhaps leveraging our potential and what we can do to actually create a new culture. So I'm really interested in the aspect of using technology, using the media, using social media and social networks, and how can we actually generate perhaps a new culture? How can we make a difference in society? Because I no longer want to work a daily job where I'm just not fulfilled myself. I want meaning in my life. I want meaning in my career. And I'm here to explore, is that really the case in your industry? Should I really make that switch? You know?
Right. Well, it's something we have to fight for as a community. You know, all too often I see a misunderstanding. Some of you will know what I mean when I say this. A misunderstanding of what UX is. You know, there are jobs that I've had in the past. We need a UX guy. You know, come into the room and can you do a UX pass on this? So, well, what do you mean exactly? I mean a UX pass. Well, just do it. Just UX this. Well, it's not really a verb. So you know what I'm talking about. So we shouldn't be brought into the room as like some sort of nerdy professor that's, well, usability principle says that the more they stress out the system, the more flexible it becomes, the less the usage becomes. I mean that's yes, that is a totally valid part of our job.
I got them some sales
But
deals and I
it
made
should
millions
be
of dollars
such a
off of my
minimal
work.
part. My hope is that everyone starts to learn that stuff. Why should it be the UX person in the room that has to pull out usability principles? You guys, project managers, creatives, they should know this too. I don't want to see us being put in the usability room. Look, I mean, like we talked about moving higher up on strategy. We have a lot to think about.
Somebody said.
A lot we can give. So thank you very much for your comments. I think you should give it a shot. One thing I was saying earlier is I love UX people. They're smart. They're interested. They're usually humanist in some way. They're sensitive, but they're strong. And the cool thing about UX people is they're generalists. There are very few fields that reward the generalist. A lot of fields you have to be an expert. Like Viking lore or something. I could never have that kind of attention span. I should probably be on Adderall. But yeah, so I think you're in the right place. If you're a curious person and you're interested in a lot of things, just do it.
So I just have a question about, you talked a lot about kind of finding meaning and kind of using customer journeys to find insights that may be beyond kind of history or digital executions. I'm just curious, like, if you have some insights into how to kind of talk to clients or how to, because a lot of times we're running projects and things are already scoped and we already have what we're doing. So how do you actually become more upfront? How is it about educating clients, after the fact? Is it like, what are tools that we can use to kind of make this process better?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, it's not easy. I think that I don't know that I have succeeded. be honest. It's the battles that win and some are lost. Look, what I would like to see, this is why I go back to that principle of work somewhere where there's a UX culture, not where you get a UX job. You know, because the whole organization should buy into UX. The whole organization should go to every client and say, you know what? Now, of course, look, I'm a little bit of an idealist. I caveat that with this. But the whole organization said, you know what? We stand for this. This is how we work, right? We will not betray what we believe is the best way to deliver an experience. And if your CEO of wherever you're working says that, if your account manager is saying that, it's a very easy thing to sell. All you have to do is solve a design solution. But I see far too often that we are constantly defending our practice. We're constantly defining for people what we do. And, you know, look, that's just part of the job right now, but I hope to see it come better. And I think part of the solution is that your organization becomes a UX organization, but you don't have a UX department.
Thank you so much.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much. And again, thank you for Yahoo for making this possible. And again, we're meeting afterwards. The Caves up the street is within walking distance.
Woo!
I hope you enjoyed this evening. Please put comments on Meetup. We love your feedback. As UX folks, we
Dude, we're hanging out this weekend.
Thank you.